Hello, we're back from staying at the limits and the extremes of the voice. I'm very, very pleased to introduce Melissa Cross, the extreme vocal coach, here to talk to you today. When I was reading Melissa's bio, the thing that really stood out to me is that everything that when she's talking about the voice, is that it's passionate. In fact, in her own words, she says, when people ask me what style of singing I teach, I say anything passionate. And just to crib a little bit from your website, in the early 90s, a passionate and unrestrained movement, there's passionate again, of singers emerged from the underground that would test the extreme limits of the human voice. And Melissa Cross heeded the call of the warriors of rock and metal, and for over 15 years developed a vocal training method. Yeah, it's like holding a metal sword. It's like the sword of metal and extreme music. And been embracing and helping artists who value raw power and passion above everything in their performance. And her groundbreaking vocal technique to enhance range and increase endurance without sacrificing intensity and individuality. And at that, I leave it again. Please give a warm welcome to Melissa Cross.
Thank you. I want to thank you, Jenny, for doing this. Preparing for this has been because I've thought about so many things in terms of the voice. I mean, the voice has ruled my existence since I was 3 or 4. It's profound to go through this journey. Well, first of all, you probably want to know, because everybody always asks me this, how did you end up teaching screaming? Because, I'm much too old for tattoos and piercings, and, I have, I'm kind of a PTA mom, and, to be hanging out with these, like, that kind of thing is kind of just really off. So I want to tell you that story because it's part of the whole catharsis thing. So what happened is that a friend of mine who went to school with me was producing these underground bands in his basement. He couldn't get the singers to get through a recording session without coughing up blood. And since I was a voice teacher already for 10 or 15 years, he thought that I might be able to help out. Now, I said, sure. And he brought in an artist, and what I saw, I was speechless because I really didn't know, I wasn't expecting it. I really wasn't expecting that noise, because it was noise. But a few years before, I had been to the Ritz. There used to be, it's Webster Hall now. Now it's called the Ritz. And I saw a show, I think it was in like 87 or something like that. It was Megadeth, Slayer, and the Bad Brains, okay? Now, I've never seen anything like this. I'm on the balcony, and I'm looking down at this sea, swarming kids, like moshing, and they have all these hand signals, and they all look kind of the same, and they got this vibe, and it was like, whoa. Like, where have I been? Like, how could all this be happening already and I don't know about it? Like, what? And then I realized I'm too old. I can't do this. But this reminded me so much of why I got into music in the first place. Okay, so let's pull it way back, right, to 1969. Okay, 1969. So what do we have? Like, before, in 1966, I was a Beatle maniac. Most of you in this room are way too young to remember this. But if you can imagine, in any location, like 300, 400,000 people mobbing this one band. And that's what it was. I mean, literally, in cities, Beatlemania was my first experience with obsession. I was obsessed with the Beatles. Everybody loved the Beatles, and they loved the sound of their voice. See, there's the voice again. My dad was British, right? Everybody on my block thought I was cool because my dad was British, so he must know the Beatles. You see the sound of that British voice, and it all just goes into this. The voice has so many ramifications besides what it is. The idea that these two little folds, 1/10 the size of your index fingernail could have that kind of impact on people's lives. It blows my mind. So anyway, we have the Beatles, and so then fast forward, right? Where did I go from what happened in '69? Oh, Janis. Okay, Janis. All right, so by the time, in '69, I've got, my hairbrush for a microphone, right? And I'm in the mirror, and I'm like doing all this stuff, right? Not thinking that that's what you would do for a living. That's just what you do to live. It became, the whole music thing became part of the fabric of my daily life, my daily thought process. Back then, it was them and us. You were either one of those guys, you were like the establishment, we used to call it, or you were the counterculture, right? So the music, again, the voices, it was at the basis of an entire lifestyle choice. It was an identification with the sound of music and these voices, right? So that swarm of people at the Ritz reminded me of something really authentic and profound, and something that was so honest and lacked the kind of like auto-tune bells and whistles and overproduction. It was raw, gutsy, like it was theater. It was theater. But it was I wanted so badly to be a part of it, and I knew I was too old. So 7 years later, having a client brought to me, I remembered that sound. I remember all of a sudden I was like, I can help this. I want to help this. I want to be a part of this. I want to be a part of this, that thing that I had when I was 13, where I just, and I don't know if you've noticed this, but a metal kid is identifiable no matter what nationality. Like sometimes I might not know the difference from someone from, Taiwan or Korea. I mean, maybe, there's certain, types of characteristics that look similar, but I always know a metal kid, no matter what nationality. It's a whole thing, and it's been a real joy to be a part of it. So I got to be useful, and I've been trying to be useful my whole life. And so I took on the challenge of taking on this one client who happens to be now one of the top metal vocalists in the, definitely in the United States. His name is Jesse Leach, and he's in a band called Killswitch Engage. And so he was like the first screamer client that I had. Now, mind you, this is like 95, 96, maybe a little later than that. But this is a long time ago. But that community is very small and very tight, and they all talk to each other. So, Jesse told Jamie Josta, and Jamie Josta told Randy Blythe, and Randy Blythe told Andrew WK, and they all just talked to each other. And all of a sudden, I had all these people that wanted to learn how to do this. It was not an option for them to stop doing it. They were going to teachers, and the teachers were saying, you just have to stop doing that. You can't do that. But that wasn't an option. Not only is it a lifestyle choice, but by this time, 10 years later, they have mortgages to pay with this. They don't have the option of saying, I can't scream anymore. It has to, so there needed to be a sustainable way. Now, my whole life since the Janis thing, I'd always wanted to learn how to make that sound without killing myself. And I went through the most amazing recipes of potato chips and mayonnaise and alcohol. Like I really had to do it like Janis. It had to be Southern Comfort. It had to be like the whole direction had to be, including the drugs, everything. I did it all, right? Because it went down with Janis, right? But the thing is that by this time I had become kind of a voice geek. I love science. My dad was a doctor. I was an artist for most of my life, I think. Well, actually, I think I've been a teacher more now. But anyway, so the thing is that I was fascinated as to what's going on when screaming happens. And it was remarkable to me that it had been going on in music for quite some time. I mean, there was Louis Armstrong and Jimmy Durante, and there was like Little Richard and James Brown, and and no one had really like sort of figured it out, or at least not, it wasn't readily available knowledge. So I went to town. The first thing I did is I listened to the sound, and I used my acting chops to imitate it with the least amount of effort and the least amount of volume. And what happened was, I realized that this is noise. This is noise. And so I went into the doctor. We went to the ENT, stuck the camera down my throat many, many times, and we talked about what was going on. So, that's how I got here. Okay, I'm classically trained, and that's another story about the voice, because you see, being the daughter of a British doctor, it's all about doing things properly, right? And wanting to be the best in the world, no matter what it was. I mean, first it was a ballerina, and then I was 12, I had to be the best actress in the world, and then, just kept going on. I wanted to be the best, so I would go and find the best place to get the best training, right? And so I went to Interlochen for high school, which is a high school of the arts in Michigan, and then I went to the Old Vic Theatre School in the United Kingdom. And my basis was opera, Shakespeare, and all that. But by the time I finished, I wanted to be Janice. And also I was a character actress, and there was no really gigs for 20-year-old character actresses back then. But anyway, so the thing is that, oh, I just lost the plot. Where did I go? Woo! Boom. Okay. It happens sometimes. Wait,
You wanted to be Janice?
I want to be Janice, right? Okay. But, oh, God. I hate when I do that. Oh, yeah. The doctor. Okay. All right. It'll come back. It'll come back. Sometimes I just get this, like, this bomb hits my brain. It's part of being old. All right. Anyway. So, back to where are we? We're here. And I bet you all want to know how to scream. Does anyone not want to know? Because I'll bet that you guys think that you have to do road rage or do trash your room kind of vocalization to make that sound. And that's precisely the attitude that gets people into trouble. So here's a place where the authenticity has to come back into the technique. But the technique is totally counterintuitive to the inference of the music, because there needs to be, like, as you said, relaxation, right? So what's going on with screaming as opposed to singing? In singing, I need my hands. Such a great rock star, right? Can you imagine in the middle of the set, like, hold on.
Here you go. Let me put that one in there, and you can give me that one.
Okay, cool. All right.
Good?
So I need.
Oh, wait.
Oh, on, off?
Is it on now?
Yeah. Okay. All right. That I could do. Okay. You have to make it really short for a little pipsqueak. Okay. So in singing, right, you have like cycles per second, a frequency, a pitch. Like, for instance, the note A is 440 sound cycles per second. And the vocal folds do this 440 times when you're singing A above middle C. Just like a guitar string or anything else, the voice is not different. In screaming, and there's different types of screaming. There's different types. It's not just one, right? Instead of the vocal folds making these periodic vibrations, they're making aperiodic vibrations, or kind of random, like this. It's like farting, right? They basically go like that. So what has to happen is that sound has to be, you have to get that sound without going to the immediate, like, that thing. Because when I really feel the emotion, I'm going to use exactly the thing that is going to make me lose control. So I want to tell you what's going on with screaming so I can help you get this. Okay, so there's different types of screaming, okay? There's different little models. The one that I prefer, because it's the least amount of wear and tear on the vocal folds, and number two, it transfers to a periodic pitch very easily. In other words, to have a transition, a singer that, doesn't do the chorus and all screaming, and then, the verse and all screaming, and then the chorus is all melodic, and then to have that kind of like cookie cutter kind of approach. I like it when artists can like move in and out of these sounds without changing their clothes, right? So this first technique has no pitch whatsoever, and it involves only the vocal folds. Okay, let me go back for a second. I'm going to oversimplify this, but a voice is basically a source and a filter, okay? It's not just one thing. There's two little pieces that make it sound the way it sounds. If we were all cut off at the neck, we would all sound like this. That's what it sounds like. That's what we all sound like. What makes it different is the filter. It is the space that surrounds the larynx, the vocal folds, that give the sound more complexity. Okay, now, in a note, like say 440, A440, right? The definition of a pitch, no matter whether it's a voice or an instrument, you have like a fundamental pitch, and then at the same time, you have overtones, right? Now, these exist in pitch. The capacity of the instrument to make those overtones audible changes. In other words, the voice and the violin have the most capacity to make all those overtones sound. So, in other words, for instance, if I have a A440 pitch, right, the next overtone is an octave higher. It would be 880, and it's going on at the same time. It's almost like a sound, a pitch is not just one pitch. It's a stack of pitches happening at the same time. And that defines the pitch. Whether the rest of those sounds are audible, that depends on the instrument that's doing it. Okay, so basically, when you have the source in this first phonation, which I'm going to call extreme 1, right? The source is making this floppy noise. And the filter is what's changing the nature of it. Let me explain. If I start with this, my mouth is closed. That is the sound of my vocal folds going like that. So there's this. The reason that I was able to do that consistently is because I have the control to keep the air supply consistent, to keep them flopping. Okay. Now, if I change the shape of my throat just by thinking of different vowels, watch what happens when I maintain that phonation and then I change the shape of my throat. So the first vowel I'm going to do is ah. I'm going to start with see, I'm changing the shape of the filter, and it's actually causing a different sound to come out, even though the actual source is the same. Now, teaching that is important because when there's metal kids, they don't think about things staying the same or being even and flowing. They think of this, right? And that's exactly the way that the airflow is going to become disrupted, right? So that's phonation number 1, and we're going to learn that today. I promise. All of you will be able to do it. Promise. You'll be great at parties if you're not in a metal band. Okay, so now extreme phonation number 2. That involves the true folds actually singing a note, like E, right? But there's something going on in the filter where there's more of a constriction higher up. And I call it the false chord phonation. it doesn't necessarily involve the false chords. Higher up from your true vocal folds, there's some tissue called the false vocal folds, and they do not have the complexity or the mechanism that the true ones do. When you make a move that's like kind of a gag reflex, and the larynx lifts, and there's a big constriction in the throat, there is that. Okay, so you can hear that has a periodic pitch. That had do, 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 but then that noise was not coming from the actual true folds. It was coming from further up in up the chain, right? So that's extreme phonation number 2, right? Extreme phonation number 3 is the basic sort of, I guess, the Cookie Monster kind of thing in its extreme form, where the larynx is extremely low and you're pushing puffs of air through it, like kind of like barking, like woof, 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 that. So that's extreme. I call that the death phonation, right? Okay. So the first one I call fry because it is a kind of vocal fry. In vocal science, fry is that's what fry is. My fry is not that, but it is an element of that because it's an aperiodic sound. So I call it fry screaming. The second one I call false chord screaming, although it doesn't necessarily use the false chords, but it uses the upper constriction of the throat, and that's the one that gets people in trouble, by the way. That's the trash your room phonation that can be done quite safely as long as there is an auxiliary accompanying breath pressure management. In other words, you have to use a lot of dump. Okay, now dump is a word. This is something about my technique that you're going to become familiar with, right? I don't use old terms. I like to keep things in the see the sound category, which is why I loved being here, because this is my whole trip. It's my whole trip, like see the sound. In other words, our voices are put in us to communicate, right? So when you're communicating, you need to have something to communicate. So there's got to be something in the imaginary nation part of your brain to communicate. So in order for any vocal technique to work, it needs to be translated into that language. Otherwise, it becomes a cerebral, mathematical kind of cognitive, kind of intellectual process, which I believe, and I have not done this experiment would be really hard to pull off, but I believe that when there is a going to the left brain, as in math problems, doing that kind of thing, even self-consciousness or judgment or any kind of thing, I believe that it interrupts the breath flow. I believe that there's a millisecond right there where actually it stops the breath and everything kind of falls apart. It only takes a split second for that to happen. Because when I don't know the answer to something, like for instance, if I forget your name and I go, see, I stop breathing. As soon as I go to that place where I'm trying to figure something out or judge it, or even try to make my voice sound a certain way, it lacks that immediacy and that spontaneity. And I think it actually affects the breathing. I really do. Which is why I loved that last piece that I just saw. That was amazing, because that was so in the moment, and so that's the you know what. I can't use bad words, right? But that's it. When I mean something passionate, I'm talking about that. I'm talking about a commitment to a present moment, without any auxiliary judgment or preconceived ideas or imitating or. And you know what? Most of my students in the beginning, they come with this idea of what they want to sound like. They come to voice lessons because they want to be somebody, right? They want to be somebody. They usually don't entertain the idea that they are enough exactly the way that they are. They always have this idea that they've heard on a CD. Not always, but usually they've got an idea that they want a result that's based on some preconception of a sound. And that's exactly the wrong way to get there. But anyway, in teaching, I sort of got digressed a little bit. The language of technique needs to come into the imagination. Okay, so dump. I use this word dump. Okay, so Pavarotti said that singing is like taking a dump. Okay, now this is what it's like for men. I do not feel this at all, right? But apparently Pavarotti says that that's what it feels like. What the dump is the what there's an older word for it called support. I hate this word support because it doesn't. A lot of old words don't really. They are based on information that's old, and it's support. Okay, so support. What is support? Does anyone know what support is in vocal language? Does anyone want to take a shot? All right. So basically, the way this machine works is that there's air pressure in your lungs. Okay? Singer's breathing is not breathing in and out. Singer's breathing is maintaining air in the lungs without holding the breath. Because once you lock the breath, then it's dead. You hold it and it's gone. There is inphonation. There are these pops, these puffs of air. In other words, the way that the vocal folds move, similar to like a guitar string being plucked, is that these like so many times a second of making the vocal folds move, right? So that's the whole purpose of it, is that. So you don't want that to be interrupted. And I believe that when you go to that part of the brain, it stops that. But singer's breathing is about maintaining a stream of air without holding the breath, okay? Now, what I use for that, rather than get into a big, like, expression, ladies, I want you to pretend like you have a strapless bra that's too big for you. And it's gonna fall under your dress if you don't hold it on with the sides of your ribs, okay? So I call it strapless bra. You know, you can call it rib reserve or whatever, but I call it strapless bra. Because strapless bra is an immediate cue, boom, right? Now, there's something really interesting that if you maintain strapless bra, and for guys, if you don't want to be a drag queen, try this. If you have a bolero that's like you're a bullfighter and it's too big for you, and you have to like sort of fill it out without raising the upper chest, right? Without doing, because everybody take a huge breath and raise your upper chest. Go like this. Okay, what are you gonna do with that? Can't really sing like that because you have too much air. You're gonna hold your breath, right? You're gonna tighten everything is up in the throat. You know, the esophagus and everything is fighting to get to the top. You know, that's not a good place to go. So we're gonna keep this out of it and not use this, and actually take what I call a by the way. Okay, so by the way goes in strapless bra. By the way goes in, for men, I call it rotunda, because rotunda is like having Madison Square Garden here. Okay, so by the way in rotunda or strapless bra, a by the way is that little breath you go, oh, by the way. It's that small. You don't need more air for sound. You need manageable air, not a volume of air. So a little tiny sip, whether it's the money note, the long note, the loud one, the big scream, it's always the same. You always need that one little, by the way, in strapless bra. And immediately, once you've inhaled in such a way, everything else will fall into place. And one of the things that falls into place is dump. All right, so for girls, can we be frank? Okay, so it's called hoo-hoo. You blow air in your hoo-hoo. Okay, I said it, it's done. I did this in Brazil and it went over like a lead balloon, and I just have to be really, because women don't speak in such a way in Brazil. So it was like, oh. So anyway, I know that we're all cool in New York here. We can talk about hoo-hoo and whatever, right? All right, so we have this like suspension of air and strapless bra rotunda. And there's this thing down here, for guys I call it dump, because if you take the sound of S and you start very quietly and you increase, you feel this kind of pushing down, kind of like taking a dump, right? Kind of. So start very quietly and go. Okay, you feel that pushing down? Okay, so that is an extreme example of support. Because support in speaking and singing does not involve anything athletic like that. It's like 1/1,000,000th of that, right? Maybe if you're going to do that big wailing thing, in an R&B song, and you're like really going to wail at the last of the chorus, maybe you're going to feel a lot of dump. And if you're doing grand opera, you're definitely going to feel a lot of dump because there's no microphone. So you have to there's a whole, it was an interesting question that was posed before about microphones, right? And in grand opera, the overtone series in the voice is very important because it's one voice against 50 plus instruments. So that overtone series of those bells, those harmonics ringing over, that's what makes it possible not to need a microphone, because the harmonics in the voice actually carry over the orchestra. And by the way, that's what carries over in the scream. Because in screaming, you have this bass and drum thing, right? If you got that high ringing thing going over, it doesn't have to be loud. By comparison, it is the loudest, and therefore it is loud. It's a perceptual thing, right? Anyway, let's go back to the dump. Okay, so what happens when you have rotunda or strapless bra is that the dump or hoo-hoo kind of operates automatically. Well, similar to the accelerator on the car. You don't think about your big toe when you're accelerating to 40 miles an hour or 50 miles an hour. You just do it. It's part of the whole thing, So that's why if you start to pull the equation apart, you will go to that part of the brain that does math problems and you'll stop the breath. So the language of technique, for me, is all about imaginative cues that can be recalled in a split second. And how many performers are there here? Okay, good. So when you're on stage, right, there's a million things going through your mind. It's the laundry, and that girl's cute over there, and oh my God, that sort of sucked, and oh my God, oh wait, what's the word? Oh yeah, but blah, 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 constant stuff. So rather than say, what's my tongue doing? What is my support doing? Instead of doing that, you have these little cues like, oh, by the way, in stress bar, I have the best one is called above the pencil. Okay, so my assistant Luke is here, and he's going to give you pencils. We're all going to learn this. Okay, but let's pretend like you all have a pencil right now, and use your hands. And I want you to pretend that you're in a country western bar and you're making the sound of yee. Can you make that sound? But put your hands here. Put your hands here and make that sound. Yee. And again. Good. All right. Now, I want you to do it again. And this time I want you to kind of use your kind of observing ego to feel how that dump thing is completely reactive to that doo-doo, to the dynamic of the sound. It's like, yee! There's something down there going, brrr, right? Try it again. Right? Feel it? Okay. Now, you probably wouldn't have felt it unless I pointed it out to you. And it should be that way. It should be that way. You should not be aware of things that you don't need to be aware of. But I need everybody to know what's going on. It's because it all has to make sense. All right. On top of that feeling here, what I want you to see is the sound emanate from somewhere between your hands and the top of your head. So let's go, yee! Again, and almost I want you to see the sound emanate from behind your eyes and even somewhat to the back, out the back balcony. So here we go, and good, okay. Now, you're all gonna have a pencil. I want you to put the pencil in your teeth. And in the front of the teeth, and you must let the jaw relax, let the skin kind of melt off the bone, because there's a couple of defects that the creator has made in the voice, and it keeps me in business. One of them is the jaw, because the jaw is completely connected to the larynx. So if your jaw's tight, guess what happens to your voice? You think that's a problem with the nose? It's not the nose. It's a tight jaw. and my tight jaw is making my larynx stay up, and there's no room for any sound or overtone, so you're just getting this really like kind of like instead of see, my jaw's really tight. Guess what happens to the sound? And the other defect is registration breaks, right? Because the voice is not a standard transmission. It is an automatic stick shift, and it has a clutch. And guess what the clutch is? The dump. It's the dump, right? It's managing that dump thing in a totally intuitive way so that when there is a registration break. Now, what is a registration break? Does anyone know what it is? Go ahead. Yes, that's one of them. There's actually more than one. There's more than one. Yes? Chest to head voice, okay? Yes, that's part of it. Now, here's an example of old words that I use above the pencil instead of head. Let me tell you why. I studied classically. Head resonance has a sound that goes with it to me. When you say head resonance, I hear a bunch of singers all at once. I hear a sound that I've heard before, and that takes the immediacy away from the direction, okay? Because all of a sudden you're in like that wrong part of the brain. Above the pencil, you're in it, right? Now, what is above the pencil? Well, watch this. This is an imaginary pencil, right? You can see that, I don't know if you can see, but my larynx, right, when I go, yee, it kind of stays low. But when I go, it kind of raises. You see that little, if I had an Adam's apple, it would be right here. It's going up. Kind of stays down. So what is head resonance? Head resonance has nothing to do with your head. It's all happening in the larynx. Everything is happening in the larynx. You see, voice teachers get this reputation for being total whack jobs because of this phenomena where the directive has to come from an imaginative cue, right? But what's dangerous is that when the imaginative cues are not based on sound information, right, and they're based on a lot of anecdotal stuff that might have worked for one teacher that sang that way themselves, but isn't sort of backed up in terms of technique. Like above the pencil is herefore now the way that you will say head resonance. Because I can speak above the pencil. Right now I'm speaking above the pencil, and I'm going to switch to below the pencil, and I didn't change the pitch, but you can hear there's a definite change in the sound. Now I'm below the pencil, and now I'm above the pencil. Above the pencil, below the pencil. Above the pencil, below. Now, what I was doing was over the pencil, under. I was going throat. So let's put your pencil in again. Let's do this. Hello. Hello. Right, okay, so it sounds really nasal, right? Hello? Okay, it's not in your nose. Well, it is to a degree, but the real phenomena there is that the larynx is so high in the pharynx that there's no room for the overtone at all. So it's a very, like, fundamental kind of tighter sound. If I go, hello, in other words, people who speak with a lot of head resonance have this sort of thing going on. You see, you can hear the high and the low at the same time. You hear that sort of high thing, and low, right? That is space in my throat, space in my pharynx, allowing the overtones to come forth, whether it's speaking or singing or screaming. So you see, like the whole idea of head resonance isn't going to work very well for screamers, right? I can't tell, Randy Blythe from Lamb of God to use head resonance when he's like, shut up, it's not. But I can say above the pencil. Okay, now above the pencil, what it does is just the imaginative cue makes your larynx stay down. If you vibe above the pencil, you're going to go back to that familiar little cue that I've taught you by working with the pencil, right? So it doesn't matter, it's not genre specific. It's not classical or country, or it doesn't, see, having those like little models of things that are genre specific, again, it sort of clamps your style And it takes away, I think it takes away the breathing. I really do. I really do. Okay, so back to this screaming thing. We are going to learn how to scream above the pencil. So what that means is that there is no scraping allowed. You know that, like when I was trying to scream like Janice my whole life, I would always go to the gag. I'd go, that doesn't work. It's not sustainable. It hurts, right? And it doesn't sound good. But a lot of people will use that until they lose their voice completely. And then they have to come to me, which is okay, I guess. But I'm going to say that if you, let's just do this above the pencil thing with the sound of a kitty cat. Can you do this? Meow. Meow. Yeah? Okay, now what you got? Meow. That feels like below the pencil, right? Meow. Meow. Now go meow. Meow. It's more like falsetto, right? Meow. Meow. Mm-hmm. Okay, so now what I want you to do is the cat it's still above the pencil, but now the cat has laryngitis. He's so old, right? The cat can only go, you know, they go, it's like the beginning of a moan. Okay, now I want you to, we are trained to hear fundamental pitch. We're not trained to hear noise, but I want you to make a concerted effort to separate the skin, which is, and the fur. I want you to like hear yourself as you're making the sound of, I want you to find the, very good. Doesn't feel like trash your room, does it? Okay. Now, I'm going to give you a little concept called, I call it flat line. You know, it's like, you know, bloop, 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 dead, right, flat line. Okay. So I'm going to ask you, and a lot of times I use the word sit on it. In other words, say I'm sitting on a sitting down and there's a buzzer under the chair and I just sit on it. It goes. See, when I pretend that the chair is doing that, my voice won't waver. But if I listen to my voice, right, just like you know when you carry a cup of coffee and it's too full and you look at it and it spills all over the place. But if you just go across the room and don't look at it, it is completely like stable. Well, this is like your voice. If you start listening to your voice, it starts to go. Because you go to the wrong part of the brain, right? And it stops the breathing. And that is like, that's the problem with stage fright, is that it completely makes you self-conscious and totally messes with the breathing. I want you to sit on the sound of. Now, if you get this, you've lost rotunda strapless bra. You have no air. In other words, you're going, so there's not enough air in the lungs to keep that farting going. So there is something, you are on top of a, remember, above the pencil. And it has that, oh, hello. It's like Marge Simpson. Hello. Oh, no, Marge. Or maybe a pterodactyl. Or a parrot. Polly want a cracker. Okay, so it sounds really loud on this microphone. Microphones take all those frequencies and go bananas because there's no one frequency for it to grab onto. So it's taking all of those overtones and just augmenting all of them, which is why the microphone does all the work in screaming. It's not about having the loudest, badass scream. It's about having the control of all those formants and all those overtones and having this flow. through the lyric. So if you are doing fry, then you can go fry. In other words, in singing, we don't use diphthongs because it messes up the note. If you go a, right, that's like a, it's a diphthong. Or ow, you're changing the shape of the vowel, it messes up the note. But in screaming, ow, totally cool to use diphthongs. And it also helps with the enunciation. It's like, no, not going, no, you, no, you are suffering to die for. Right? So all I'm thinking is like these sweeps. I'm not even thinking about, and that's the really cool thing about imaginative technique is that, sometimes you're not into the song. You performed it a million times. You really just want to go home. But when you see the sound, if you see the sound and you see these sweeps, it just passes the time so nicely. No, you, and it looks like I'm into it. But I'm just playing around with, I must have done too much LSD when I was younger or something. Just kidding. Sort of. Anyway. Now, that sound is also really good if you're not a metal singer and you're just a plain old blues singer or just a plain old pop singer, because a lot of people don't want to have a clean sounding voice anymore because it doesn't sound real. I don't know if you noticed this, but in the past 50 or 60 years, it's not about being beautiful anymore. It's about being real. Somewhere the aesthetic changed. Particularly in non-classical music, of course. Like it's a popular music has always had classical music has always been, somewhat elitist. Unfortunately, it shouldn't be that way, but it is. And so, going back to that beginning of the thing where I talked about doing things properly, like learning from the best and learning all that stuff, and then realizing that all that stuff has context, but you got to be careful with the context. Because, again, head resonance to me sounds like ee, not beep, beep. It's the same thing. Beep, beep, that's head resonance. Ee, that's head resonance. But if you think above the pencil, both of those have the same experiential kind of thing, right? So that's why I think technique needs to be not genre specific, but I digress again. All right, let's go back to the fry technique in terms of adding a note to it. When I say, wow, wow, you see there's a note in there and there's noise in the note. Now what's really interesting is that I actually want to show you this because I think you're all old enough to know. Let's see. Where is it? Hello. Aha. Okay. So let's do. This is. Can you see this? Has anyone not seen this before? It's kind of grossed out. These are your vocal folds. Actually, they're mine. But all right. So can you see that? Okay. Can you see what's going on here? Can you? Is it clear? I wish I could. I don't know if you can see. Let me see what you see. Oh yeah, it's not dark enough. Darn. Okay. All right. So. No, it's the shades actually have to go down. I think for a second. Then we really see. Do they go down? The shades. Oh. Wow. What a great college this is. This is awesome. Okay, now you can see it. All right. So these are, vocal folds. Remember I said it's 1/10 the size of your fingernail, both of them. So this is a huge magnification of vocal folds, okay? Now, what you're looking at here is not the vocal folds, the viewpoint that you're getting, it would be as if you were looking straight down and you're only seeing the top of the folds. In other words, the folds go further down a little bit. In other words, you're not seeing a lateral this. You're seeing the top view and it goes further down. So that's further down the windpipe. So the air is coming through. Now, you see this sort of waterfall thing coming here? That blah, 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 blah. What you're looking at here is not a stroboscopy. This is high-speed footage. In other words, this camera is, I think, 600 frames per second or 6,000, I don't know. It's all zeros. But, you know, it's basically, it's slow motion. So this entire film is 1 second of phonation. Right? So you wouldn't be able to, there's no sound that goes with this because you can't sync up the sound. But basically the sound of this is you see that the folds are actually just like, they're not vibrating. Let me show you what they look like when they're singing. You'll see the difference. This is normal. Okay, so this is a periodic vibration. You see how the wave is doing something periodic? Okay, now this gunk coming at the bottom here, you see it more on the other one, right? That's totally normal. There's nothing wrong there, but that was just mucus, okay? It's totally normal. But that was fascinating for me to see because that is showing what that popping air is, that because that's that but that's the air moving through the windpipe against the folds. Okay, so I don't know what note I'm singing here, but it's some note. And you see it's like, you see there's this, it's amazing. There's these layers, like vocal folds are the most amazing things. They have, it's like if you have a glove and you have like 3 layers of a glove, like your hand is like the muscle, and then the top layer is like, if you take the skin on the top of your hand and you move the skin and see how it's kind of loose, right? That's the place where God lives with the voice, right? That's that thing that vibrates so sensitively, right? Because it's so loose, just like a great guitar, acoustic guitar. It's got a like little bracing and like a thin like kind of piece of wood that has the most ability to vibrate. So when you get an injury, it's that outer layer that gets, when you get an injury usually from overuse, is what usually happens. The swelling creates a situation where there's a scar or a blister or a cyst, and that interrupts the vibration of that outer layer called the epithelium. Anyway, that's normal phonation. Now we're going back to the extreme one, which is the fry phonation. Right? Now this one, this is extreme number 2. And this one is half and half. So here's your, whoa, whoa, come on. Oh, yeah. See, some note and some noise, right? I know that sounded like a cat dying, but you can see that at one portion of the fold is like vibrating periodically, and the rest of it is blowing in the wind, right? So that's the kind of control that I need to teach people who do this every night, right? Because you cannot sustain road rage or trash your room phonation and get through it. You're out by the second day, and then you're chasing your tail for the entire rest of the tour. So the false chord one, right? Now that one, I think that sopranos and tenors and countertenors should be careful because it's really easy for baritones to do it, but sopranos, it's a hard job. It's hard to sustain that. It just doesn't. It can be done, but I believe that the fry is much better for smaller larynxes and thinner vocal folds. That's not, thinner and smaller is not worse. It's highly effective, believe me. But I think that it's not, I would have a hard time, even if I was age appropriate, I would have a hard time sustaining with my voice a false chord performance. But fry is easy. Okay, so here's false chord, and it's almost impossible to see it because my vocal folds are vibrating behind that. In other words, if you were to see my true vocal folds, you would have to probe stick the camera through my closed throat. And we did that once, and what we saw was that my vocal folds were just doing a plain old simple note, right? And it was the rest of the muscles, the rest of the muscles, the rest of the apparatus in my pharynx, right, was involved in the noise. However, on this, on that thing, my entire mechanism is vibrating. I'm talking about everything, like cartilage, everything is all going. It's super violent. It's very violent. Okay, so in order to counteract or support that, you need the dump or hoo-hoo, right? So I believe that you can pretty much get away with any kind of gnarly sound you want as long as you have the accompanying support. But the support needs to be not self-conscious. It needs to be invoked in a completely spontaneous way and seamlessly. You can't say, okay, turn it on, turn it off. It has to flow, right? So that's what a good warm-up is, by the way, for any kind of genre. It's a mind-body connection with the mechanism. It's not about aerobically warming up your vocal folds. Remember, these muscles are the size, 1/10 the size of your fingernail. So to think of it as like this gross motor thing that you do in the gym at 7:30 in the morning is not a good way to think of it, because it's not that kind of a thing. It's much more of a cognizance of a mind-body kind of synchronization, right? And that is really, I think, at the basis of a warm-up. I mean, yes, there is some, you have to get through the cobwebs and everything in the morning, and it's, you have to warm up. But in terms of like, 45 minutes an hour is not better than 11 minutes. It's about like the kind of specificity and mindfulness that you're warming up with. I believe that if you know what you're doing, and you're not just making vowel sounds on different scale tones, but you actually are doing something specific, and you know what that is, that's the way to go. Like, for instance, say you're not feeling well and you got to do a show, right? Sometimes you can't cancel, right? So rather than like warm up for 45 minutes and just sort of push and push and push and push, I would kind of like, jiggle it and see like what sound can I make with the least amount of effort, like sort of like go inside of my body and my mind. I mean, go inside and figure out how to navigate what I'm dealing with, right? Rather than just like, it's not, it needs to be part of your soul. It is part of your soul, right? All right, so let's go back to, I'm going to give you an exercise of how to put rasp in your voice without hurting yourself, which is what I tried for many years to do with the mayonnaise and potato chips and booze and cigarettes and all that, and it was not consistent. Sometimes it would work, but not always. This always works, right? So if you can actually go back to that, can you sit on that phonation for me? Make it above the pencil. Okay. Now, can you, without stopping that sound, can you just change the shape of the pipe that the sound is coming through into something that would be the shape of ah? But don't say ah. Ah. Just keep the phonation going. Ah. Remember? Good, that's fry. Okay. Now, let's see if we can do a flat line exercise by taking a tone. We're going to go, eh. Just, I want you to think of that. See the sound. See the sound. I want you to see a flat line. See a flat line. Go, eh. See, if you see the flat line, you're not listening to your voice. That's when all the magic happens. When you take loose of the steering wheel and you just let it happen and you become a vessel, that's what I mean. If you see the sound, you can get out of all your crap. Okay, so I want you to switch back and forth from flat line to fry without losing the flow of the flat line. So let's think of it this way. Let's think of it as a green garden hose, right? And this sound of that's just water going through the hose, like right? That's just water. Okay. Now this is also water. So without interrupting the flow, I want you to think of that as like something flying over, just pinching the hose. So you're going, so it's turning on a dime here. Very small movement. Try it. Yeah, good. See, that doesn't hurt. Doesn't hurt at all, right? Doesn't feel like you were like scraping anything, right? It didn't hurt, right? Right. So that feels a lot better than trying to do it the way it feels when you really do it for real. That's totally the wrong way to go about it. So if I go, that exercise helps me turn on a dime between noise and this is something that needs to be like intuitive with the sound of the music, right? It's not something that you try to plan, like, okay, on this syllable I'm going to put fry on it, and on this syllable, it should never be that. It should always be something that comes from an emotional impetus, right? So what I want you to do now is I want you to practice this. I want you to take both of those and combine them together. So we're going, now you have to like not be afraid of sounding horrible. That's the trick. It's not pretty. In fact, learning how to sing pop or learn non-classical music is all about not being pretty or not sounding nice, not sounding like anything, just being, like feeling something. And the trick is to have the technique to like make those feelings come out with the most amount of overtone you can get in there. Because intonation, in other words, pitch, it's important. I mean, people don't know why they don't like something, but I can tell you that they are much more likely to vacillate towards something that is harmonically sensible. And if there is a lack of intonation, there needs to be a heck of a lot of like emotional commitment to make up for it. Because when there's no emotional commitment, that's when you're going to get criticizing of the voice. When the emotional impetus is not there, people will always find something wrong with your voice. They'll find something because you're not in it. If you're not in it, you can't get there. The only way to get there is to go there, right? And to have the technique that actually allows the amount of, well, let's talk about intonation here, okay? Because some of my favorite singers seem to have very poor intonation, but they don't. They're actually right on the money. Like I remember like seeing a lot of people trying to imitate Mick Jagger. And they used to like slide around on the notes all the time. But if you really listen to Mick Jagger, and remember there was no auto-tune then. There was no tuning back then. His intonation is like spotless. But he slides up to it. He slides and slides around it emotionally, but he's always nailing that fundamental pretty close to the... Nobody's perfect. Nobody's perfect. But the closer you get to perfect, like the better, right? So let's talk about the spatial reasoning. See, our imaginations, when we think like notes up there, high notes, there is no up there. There is no up there. And there's no down there. Basically, a higher frequency is a faster vibration, right? Now, that's a mind blower, right? There's no more high notes. There's no more low notes. They're above the pencil, right? Coming from the same place. So this above the pencil thing has a lot more context. If you have a cello or a fretless bass or some instrument that doesn't have frets or black and white keys, it doesn't have a sight cue, what has to happen is that the mind has to audiate or aim in a split second before. Otherwise, it doesn't go there. In other words, there needs to be some kind of stability in terms of intention and execution, right? So the audiator, I call it the audiator, right? It's an angel or a devil on your shoulder that basically sings the note before you get there. So when you're on this note and there's an octave, you're already like hearing a bell going beep when you're going right? Hey, and if I hear it before I get there, it'll go there. If I just throw something quote unquote up there means that I'm going to raise my larynx to get up there. And guess what happens? The overtone isn't there to make the note. In other words, it's flat. It's there. You got registration issues and vowel sounds that don't match like the certain positions, and you'll think that you're about to sing that note right on the money, but it just won't go there because it's just not. So if you hear the note, you will probably get there. So let's. It's a great source of confidence, this audiator thing, right? Let's think of like a happy birthday. You know that song always sucks. Have you ever noticed that? Every birthday party, unless it's like trained singers, it always sucks, right? Because it's a hard song. First pitfall, the first two notes are the same note. Most people have difficulty staying the same. They'll go happy, 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 instead of happy, happy, right? They go happy, because they're singing the song, right? Happy, but that's not the notes, right? Then in the third line, it's happy, beep, beep, but they always change the key right there. They go happy birthday, and it all just falls apart right there. Everybody goes to a different key. By the third line, it's just a complete shit show. Sorry for my language. Okay, so why is that a hard song? Because of the intervals, right? Why are intervals difficult? Because there's a lack of consistency in the approach. If you learn to play darts and you keep changing where you're standing or keep holding your arm in a different way, you're not going to make bullseyes if you keep changing the form. So if there's an execution of pitch that involves a specific imaginative place from which the pitch emanates, i.e. above the pencil, right? So above the pencil, they're called monkey hee-hees. Okay, so if I go, right? It's monkeys. So you can feel how the dump and the hoo-hoo gets engaged with that. Okay, so, and also, that's above the pencil. Okay, so now you have a nice sharp dart. You have a really sharp tool that you can hear a note and go, so if I play a note, I'm going to sing it. E, and you hear the note and you go, eep, eep, right? That monkey hee-hee. Here, I'm going to try this. I want you to sing this. I mean, with a he. Do this. Do that. Oh, bass. Okay. Love that sound. Okay. So I want you to, I'm going to sing a note and I want you to make a he, really quick he. So I'm going to go, eep. I want you to go, e, e. Yeah, the pitch that I'm doing. E. Octave lower. That's a fifth. E, E. Oh, sorry. Octave higher. E, E, E. Oh, you can go E. Yeah, there. Okay. So I'm going to give you pitches around there. E. See you? Okay. So, right, you threw something out there, right? You just threw something out there, and that's what most people do. They just throw something out there, and sometimes it lands, and sometimes it doesn't. But if you audiate the pitch, it will always go there. And if you put that in your little hard drive forever and ever, you will have supreme confidence when you sing because you'll always be on the money. You'll always be ahead, just a little bit ahead of where you want to go, right? So, these are all tricks that evolve from having an imaginative basis of vocal technique that is based on sound science.
It can't be based on, what works for me. It has to be, it needs to be explained so that you don't think of it as something that has tarot cards and rabbit's feet, and it needs to make sense, right? And like the thing about audiating, like for instance, I have this thing called the 5-star recipe, which I love. I have to teach you this. If I don't do anything, I've got to teach you this. Okay. So if you got to do a recording or you have to do sing a set, right, a song, every song needs this 5-star recipe. Okay. You ready? Number 1, you take every interval and you hee it. So if it's happy birthday, hee. See, I missed it. Right? Hee. Oh, I missed that one too. Hee. Oh, it's too low. Hee. Right? Now, in order to do that, I had to hear. I can't go. It won't go there unless I specify, right? So the first exercise is staccato monkey hee-hees. Second exercise is ya-yas, right? Legato ya-yas, like ya. So that is like the jaw opening and closing because the jaw has to like open up. He is actually a very open vowel, but it's also kind of restrictive, right? Ya, and you do that with vibrato. I'm speeding this up really fast because we have to end. I'm having such a blast. I didn't say half the things I wanted to say, but I'm sure I'll wake up in the middle of the night going, oh, I forgot to tell them about that. All right, anyway, the third exercise, right? I want you to chant. So it's like a note that's not the highest, not the lowest. Like, happy birthday to you, happy birthday to you, happy because this is what it feels like to sing a song or scream at the It's like without the happy birthday to you, happy birthday to you, right? But it's nice flowy stuff, right? Especially on happy birthday. The high notes don't need a bump. It's he. Oh, I missed it. He. There it is. See, got to be really like strict with yourself, right? Okay, so 1 is he-he's, 2 is ya-yas, 3 is chanting, 4 is vowel-y. So you take all the consonants out and do all vowels. A-ya-e-oo, 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 a-ya-e-oo. Flow with all those vowels, right? And then you basically you open up those vowels, right? Then the consonants get put back in without interrupting the vowel flow. And then here's the best one, all right? This separates the men from the boys and the ladies from the superstars, okay? The mirror. You have to go to the mirror and you have to say the words to you and as if you were being spoken to, and you have to believe yourself. And if you don't believe yourself, you suck, okay? You have to believe yourself. If you start going, happy birthday to you, happy birthday to you, happy birthday, dear Melissa, happy birthday to you. Nobody home. Lights on, nobody home. I have a great voice, but if I'm not there, I ain't there, and it sucks, right? So I have to go someplace. Like, it could be pink. It could be maroon. It could be chocolate. It could be just sea sounds. Happy birthday to you. I don't know what I was thinking there, but it was something. And it wasn't about me being self-conscious. It was just I just boom, went there. Happy birthday to you. That was totally off the top of my head. That's what makes stars. Taking risks. Taking risks. So may you all risk your life forever. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Melissa. Everything's so great. Yay! All right. We don't have, we have time for one question from the audience for Melissa while we set up for the Beatbox House. Questions? You answered everything. No questions. They're all solved. They're going to follow these. Okay. We have a question over here.
Let me give you them. Thank you. So I know you specialize in screaming. What else do you teach as a vocal coach?
Anything passionate, anything that I teach everything. I mean, really everything. You come in and you say, I want to do this, and I'll say, okay, so what is that going to give you? You know, I want you to do what's coming out from you, not your idea of a genre. I tell people to be careful about being genre whores, because that will actually limit you. See, people ask me, what kind of music should I be doing? You don't need to know what kind of music. You do you, right? If you like a song, you sing it your way and let the radio station figure out what it is. It's none of your business what it is. As long as it's coming straight from you, it doesn't matter what genre it is. In fact, it's good if they can't figure out what genre it is, because that means they haven't heard it before, and that's a plus.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else? Any other questions? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We're going to take a few minutes to set up for Beatbox House. So take the 5 minutes to do what you will, and then come back.